Welcome, Wargamers, to the bloodthirsty Mortal Realms, as we take a week to unpack the newest faction to fight for their claim in an unforgiving world. Because we're going to swan dive into the Soulblight Gravelords, aka Team Edward. Now, I want to say up front that this book is the next iteration of Legions of Nagash, so some of the lore topics that are in this I'm not going to cover simply because I've already gone into so much detail on them, and what I mean by that is stuff like the origins of vampirism in the old world, the realm of death itself, Shyish, and so on, so you'll find links to those in the description down below, check them out there. But let's not waste any time and jump straight in by asking, who are the Soulblight Gravelords? You see, in the earliest days of the Age of Myth, Nagash was freed by Sigmar and unleashed upon the realm of death, Shyish. He immediately wanted to assert dominance over this realm. There were, at one time, many other gods of death. However, Nagash consumed nearly all of them. His thirst for power and control wanted to see him rise to being like the sole heir and the god of Shyish itself, like the singular point of death. But there's a problem with that. Nagash can't be everywhere. Deities in this setting are not omnipresent, nor are they omnipotent, meaning they're not all-knowing and they're not like everywhere at once. So, needing himself some lieutenants, he went through the void and looked for the shattered soul stuff of his servants in the old world. Those that were afflicted with a kind of unlife, something that he could command, someone that would understand him, maybe know him personally, that would maybe not revere him, but certainly follow his orders. And while he did choose a lot of them, specifically in the case of looking for, tracing the lineage of vampires, he chose Manfred, Neferata, and Ushoran to be his devoted servants. All vampires in the mortal realms are descended from these three progenitors. Now, understand this, vampirism, which is kind of like the end result of having the Soulblight Curse, it's not natural, okay? It is an arcane and biological curse put upon a living being. So, direct lineages can be and are meticulously traced. Now, I'll say real quick, the vampires of Ushoran's line went down their own crazy dark path. See my videos on the Flesh Eater Courts for more information on that. But this week, we're going to be focusing on the other two, the Mortarchs, Manfred and Neferata. Even though all bloodlines across the realms originate from them, enough time has passed for those of the Soulblight to evolve, to grow, to branch out, to form lineages, bloodlines, and dynasties of their own, which we're going to be covering later this week. But this means the Soulblight have been in the mortal realms since the beginning, or at least as long as Nagash has been free. Not like the Kharadron overlords who, they were founded at a certain point during the Age of Myth, and they kind of went away for a while, and then you just descended from the sky, and you have to ask yourself, well, where were they this whole time? The Soulblight were here the entire time, but the way that they survived is by remaining in the shadows and living in areas that are so inhospitable that even Chaos armies struggle to get to. Or some of them, in the case of Neferata, just drew a line in the sand and dared anyone to cross it. Right? Few other factions had the military power to just push back the Chaos armies during the Age of Chaos. For example, Fire Slayers were one. They had their magma holds. They were able to fortify. Not all groups and civilizations were strong enough to do so. So let's really explore what it means to be a Soulblight vampire in this video, and we'll talk about how this core idea is stretched and morphed throughout the realms and time later this week. But as I said, at its core, the Soulblight Curse is an arcane and biological curse. What I mean is, on a biological level, the people who are afflicted with it gain immense speed and strength, increased senses and perception. Now all of a sudden they need blood to survive. How much they need on a daily basis is very unclear. It kind of looks different dynasty to dynasty if I'm kind of getting the right sense from the lore. But otherwise they are functionally immortal. In fact, sometimes they can be destroyed and resurrected by acolytes later on. Their bodies go under some kind of metamorphosis. Usually the fingers grow very long. They have kind of a maw that kind of comes forward to make them a little more animalistic. Large fangs, obviously. Sharp features, that kind of stuff. And that, like I said, that's the biological side of things. But when I say Arcane Curse, what I mean is that when you get the Soulblight, disease, curse, bite, whatever, you become a moat or a well of death magic yourself. All things with the touch of Shyish around them feel invigorated by their mere presence. You immediately get a mastery of magic, particularly, obviously, of those about manipulating death magics, but they can use other things as well. You just become a wizard overnight. Many of the Soulblight are also very well adept at shadow magic, as concealment and guile are what's kept them alive for so long. And when you consider that oftentimes a vampire is the only, actual sentient character on a battlefield, even they might be commanding thousands of undead, but it helps to kind of keep them, the sole mind of all this army, alive by being dodgy and kind of fading away. Now, the magnitude of this magical power can be as simple as, bringing a couple skeletons back during a fight, to grand rituals where entire armies are raised in a moment. And as a central point of death magic, any followers or acolytes a vampire has can channel their energy into their lord, further augmenting a vampire's magical power. They become a focus of death magic, if you will. And one thing I want to add on, it's kind of hard to articulate here when we were talking about the Soulblight Curse, is that it adds a animalistic or a bestial nature to the one afflicted. Like when you read this book, it's kind of mentioned in little throwaway lines from cover to cover that, a vampire in AOS looks mostly like a person. They're kind of in the uncanny valley a little bit when it comes to their appearance. They're clearly not normal people, but they can pass for human if they're covered up, and they can act like one and so on. But under that thin veneer is a true monster, a mindless creature that wants to rip and shred and destroy any living thing around it. And therein lies the curse part of, Soulblight as a disease or vampirism in the Age of Sigmar universe. Right, you want to be a vampire? Cool. Here's all these crazy buffs compared to mortals. But the thing is, you don't really get to enjoy them, because you've also signed up for an eternity of this internal battle against the monster inside of you. Even if you enjoyed, killing and murder and blood drinking as a mortal, you lose your sense of self-control and your sense of self, quite honestly, because all of a sudden when you go to enjoy those things, the animal comes out and you no longer have the chance to love and relish in it. You can give in to those desires and become more animalistic, but then all of a sudden you're deviating into a creature and not this mortal who happens to have all these amazing powers and gifts. So with that being said, how and why do the Soulblight go to war? This is, to me, honestly, where the faction as a whole shines, because there are limitless possibilities, which is rare, frankly, in a death-themed army. In fact, of the factions that we have right now, it's one of the most versatile from a lore perspective. Nagash is in the book because he is the founder of the Soulblight Curse in the Age of Sigmar, obviously to spread the power of Shyish far and wide. But here's the thing is that he gave them so much autonomy to enact that one, will, that there's so much variety in them. Some Soulblight hate being under his authority, others revere him as a god, some go to war with ranks of skeletons that, move in this perfect lockstep, because they like the regalness of this, nice-looking army. Some go to war with shambling hordes of zombies because they don't care. They just see it as meat to get in the way of the enemy. Some use armies as a last resort and prefer politics and, in the shadow manipulation. Vampires can be nomadic. They can, kind of move around and then raise armies as needed as they go. Others may carve out a territory for themselves. They rule cities of living and dead alike. Again, there's so much versatility here. It's awesome. But of course, we are a tiny bit limited to, creating an army by what we have models for. Although, honestly, I would love to be able to bring, 1 in 5 units from Cities of Sigmar intended to be like living subjects that die and are resurrected mid-war. I don't know. I just love it. I just, when it comes to how they conduct war and why they have motivations for going out and how they can construct their forces, I think this is where I fall in love with the Soulblight Gravelords. Now, to be honest, my first introduction to Games Workshop's take on vampirism was back in the End Times series. The first book, actually, End Times Nagash, had a huge fight between, vampire counts and tomb kings, which on the surface sounded incredibly boring, right? Because one side would kill some dudes, their hero would bring them back and keep fighting, rinse and repeat for days. But what it actually illustrated in a very practical way is that when they go to war, it's a matter of willpower, right? It's not about, the undead or the armies they raise. Soulblight vampires could not care less about the shambling corpses that they lead. They are a means to an end. When they go to war and coordinate these grand forces, it's a display of their mental acumen and willpower, both of which turn the well of death magic inside them into a deadly weapon, projecting their presence, their will across the battlefield, mustering reinforcements from fallen enemies and allies alike, doing whatever it takes to win. For them, because they are the sole, puppet master of this whole force, to win a battle proves that they are just mentally dominant over everything around them. So to me, when you play a Soulblight Gravelords army, yes, you have an army full of models and units, right? You have skeleton warriors and corpse carts and zombies running around, but all of them feed back to a single point of power, the vampire controlling them. And so let's say you have this big illustrious army, it's led by a vampire named Jack. In other factions, the whole army gets credit for running down the enemy or triumphing over evil. Here, it's just one more entry on Vampire Jack's resume. That vampire in charge is the only person who matters and gets credit for everything this army does. It's his might, his will, his power. It touches, it animates, it invigorates and motivates every single soldier on the table. And I love that for the same reasons that I love the idea of Path to Glory, as a concept within Chaos armies. One hero rising in power, rank, and prestige, watching them, rise and fall. And it's the stuff that epic narratives are born from. And so I wanted to end out this introduction to the idea of what a Soulblight Gravelord, vampire is by asking the question, why is this so cool? As I just mentioned, it fits into my love of the Path to Glory type storytelling device, right? Some armies can be a little tricky to write lore for without feeling like you're pulling too far away from the source material. But this book, boom, chef's kiss. Mwah. The narrative writes itself, or at least has enough room for you to tell just about any story. Whether your vampire lord is a nomadic barbarian who savagely kills everything they meet, or they're a gracious ruler over mortals and undead alike who do anything to protect their home, these two extremes both pop to life when this army's on the table. Because fundamentally, you're telling the story of a singular character, and every game you play narratively reinforces the lore that you wrote. Like I said, no matter what, it's just an entry in their resume, because it all boils down to a character. I brought this a lot up when I was doing Skaven Week, and that is that hero-focused armies are always my favorite, right? You'll write lore for like 6 characters and boom, you're done. You don't have to only have, one character. Obviously, this whole time I've been talking about, the sole character that leads an army. You can have tons of vampires in your force, but what I'm getting at is that when it comes to commanding the undead, there's a mind that is greater behind the skeletons, and I like that concept. So even if you're, playing one army, and let's say you have, 3 vampires, one of them could prefer to use skeleton warriors because he likes, the lockstep, the nice, seeing the military orders work together in perfect fluid formation. Then that's that vampire's prerogative. And then you can have 2 vampires that are like, I don't care about undead stuff. I just want to go murder people. And then they're just off doing their own thing. Even though it's an army that's full of skeletons and 3 vampires, that's the lore that you can write of just assigning who's controlling what units. Again, it just writes itself. Now, one thing that was interesting to me is that I had never seen them described as like wells of shyish magic. That was actually something that kind of popped off the page to me, and I love that idea, to be honest with you. It kind of raises a few questions that I think could really be well explored, like in a Black Library novel. Like, can this well be tapped into by Nagash? You know, can it be tapped into by his followers? Obviously, I mean, I'm assuming that's how they survive death. Like, it's made very clear a vampire can be struck down, but as long as their remains are taken by their acolytes, given enough time, they can come back. Which isn't new. That's something that happened in the old world as well. And I really do like it quite a bit. But I wonder, like, is that the thing that keeps them in the realm? That, like, little mote of energy, I like that a lot. And how that can be used and channeled and inflicted for pain on others and rejuvenation for his allies. I don't know. I think there's a lot of possibility there for storytelling, too. And I know that I mentioned a lot of, Soulblight Gravelords as an army is not vampires and then undead thralls. There's things in between, like, the necromancer and the guy riding the corpse cart, that kind of stuff, where they're not undead nor are they vampires type thing. And those form the basis of followers, acolytes, sycophants, whatever you want them to be. I think those are equally interesting as to why they are there. And so, again, it's just another thing to write storytelling about, like having a little cabal of necromancers that follow, your vampire lord. Just sounds so cool. I would love to have a little unit that's just mortals that are like, I love death magic, and this riding the coattails of this vampire is how I get more of it. But friends, I'm going to go ahead and close it off for this video. I am so excited to share everything that I love about Soulblight Gravelords this week. Basically how it's going to go is we're going to talk loosely about how they go to war, how the dynasties work, because that's kind of the new idea instead of bloodlines that they gave us. So I want to kind of explore that. And then the rest of the week, we're going to talk about the 3 great dynasties and how they each bring a fresh new vision to what it means to be a vampire. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's video. Happy wargaming.